It was one of those
Sundays when the morning sun fell through the stained glass windows of the church as if the light itself carried a message. The colors, red, blue, and gold, cast patterns on the wooden pews and on the faces of the people who listened in silence. Jude was sitting in the third row from the front. Beside him sat Mary, his wife. Her hands rested quietly in her lap, but Jude knew her well enough to see that she was tired. On her other side sat their daughter Sammy, who tapped her feet gently against the sofa in front of her as she tried to remain still. In her hand she held her little red teddy bear. It was small, a little worn, with one eye that was looser than before. She had taken it everywhere with her since she was 3. Sometimes she talked to it. Sometimes she squeezed it tightly when she felt uncomfortable. Today it sat on her lap, its black beady eyes staring at the pulpit as if it were listening too. The preacher stood at the front of the pulpit. His voice sounded calm, carried by the silence of the church. For the ways of a man are open before the eyes of the Lord, he said as he slowly looked through his Bible. He weighs all his paths. He looked around the church. That is in Proverbs 5, verse 21. A few people nodded. The pastor leaned slightly on the edge of the pulpit. We often think that no one sees what we do, that our choices remain hidden. But Scripture says otherwise. God sees not only our deeds, He sees our ways, our paths, the direction in which our heart walks. Jude looked at the wooden floor. The words touched him in a strange way, not because he had done anything wrong, but because he knew how complicated a human life could be. The predecessor continued, "The question is not just what are you doing today? The question is, where does your path ultimately lead?" Sammy leaned against Mary and pressed the little bear closer to herself. "How much longer?" she whispered. Mary smiled. "Almost done."
Jude glanced at his daughter. Her dark hair fell halfway over her face, and she pushed it away with a small movement of her hand. The little bear wobbled briefly on her lap, but she caught it automatically, as if it were a second skin. It was such a small moment, but Jude noticed that he looked at it longer than usual, as if he wanted to remember it. The service slowly drew to a close. The minister concluded with a prayer, and then the soft rustling began as people picked up their coats and greeted each other. The church filled with voices, handshakes, smiles. "Jude!" He turned around. Behind him stood Thomas, a man from the congregation who had looked a bit tired lately. Jude smiled. "How are you?" Thomas shrugged his shoulders. "Honestly, difficult." They walked slowly towards the exit while the people around them talked. "Work?" asked Jude. Thomas nodded. "Work. And it's not easy at home either." He sighed. "It sometimes feels like everything is happening at once." They stopped for a moment at the church door. Jude placed a hand on his shoulder. "Listen," he said calmly. "Sometimes it seems like everything is against you. But that doesn't mean you are alone." Thomas looked at him. Jude continued, "You don't have to solve everything today. Sometimes it is enough to just take the next step." Thomas looked at the ground for a moment. Then a smile slowly appeared. "Thank you," he said. He nodded. "That's exactly what I needed." Jude smiled back. "That is what we are here for." Outside, a fresh wind blew through the street. Mary and Sammy were already standing by the car. Sammy sat on the back seat with the little red bear still in her hand. She drew with her finger in the fogged-up window. the bear wiggling on her lap, his black eyes gleaming in the morning light. Mary looked at Jude as he came closer. "Are you coming with me?" she asked. Jude glanced at the street. The sun was higher by now. People walked past. Cars drove past. He turned back to Mary. "Go home with Sammy already," he said. "I'm just going for a quick walk." Mary kept her gaze on him for a few seconds, long enough to show that she knew him, long enough to know that it wasn't an ordinary stroll. But she said nothing. She only nodded. "Okay." Sammy looked up from the back seat. She held up the teddy bear as if it were saying goodbye too. "Dad?" Jude smiled. "I'll be home soon." She waved at him with the teddy bear while Mary started the engine. The car drove away slowly. Jude stayed standing on the sidewalk, his hands in his coat pockets. He looked down the street. Then he started walking, not heading home, but the other way around, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Or perhaps not. The words of the sermon came back into his mind. "The ways of a man are open before the eyes of the Lord." Jude looked up at the sky for a moment. "I hope so," he mumbled softly, and he walked on. The street grew quieter. The church slowly disappeared behind him. And somewhere, without him knowing it, this was the beginning of a path that would change his life forever.